Thank you. Now let me move to Siddharth Varadarajan. I'm going to read a long quotation. I think it was taken from The Wire, written by Shyam Saran. Despite significant convergence on some issues, the relationship between India and China is and likely to remain essentially adversarial for reasons that go beyond the boundary dispute. Stronger relations in the domain of bilateral trade and economic engagement would not result in making China more amicable for India. We should not, therefore, make the mistake of expecting a political payoff from our economic relations. China's position on Pakistan and boundary issue would not alter as we move toward deeper economic integration. Mr. Varadarajan.
I think what Ambassador Shyam Saran has written there is this is the new conventional wisdom in India. I don't think that the new Nehruvian consensus or idea that Ambassador Man Singh spoke about is what is driving government policy. And this is very clear that under Prime Minister Modi, there is a sense in which India wants to, is showing greater willingness to put some of its issues on the table, raise difficult issues, not always successfully, not always effectively. My concern, or I don't fully agree with this point of view, for the simple reason that predictions of future adversarial relations, if they are factored into our current behavior, tend to be self-fulfilling. And I think we need to guard against that. If you were to take a long view of India-China relations, say in the last 50 years, it's very clear that relations today are far better than they were at any point in the past. By any metric. Trade, investment, people-to-people contact, high-level engagement, military-to-military, or even maritime engagement. None of this stuff happened in the past. India and China have greater comfort in discussing regional issues today than they've had in the past. So notwithstanding the fact that both India and China, as they grow, are going to bump up against each other, and there is evidence of this happening already, if we foreground or front load this idea of an adversarial relationship, I think we will, and especially when we front load and do so from our current position of relative weakness, there's a danger that we end up punching above our weight. And I'll give you a concrete example. The MEA and the PMO made a big deal about how Narendra Modi raised Zakir Rahman Lakhvi's issue with the Chinese president. For the life of me, I can't imagine what was the utility of raising it and what was accomplished by doing so. The Chinese position is very well known. It had been conveyed 1 week before that by Sushma Swaraj to the Chinese counterpart in Kathmandu. And it was clear, or certainly the professionals who work in the MEA and in the permanent mission in the UN and the Indian embassy in China should have been very clear in their assessment that whether Modi raises this or not, the Chinese are not going to change their view. So Mr. Modi raises it. This becomes a big issue in the briefing by the Foreign Secretary, and promptly the next day, you have the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson essentially say there's no change. So, an initiative that we are told represents the new tough line of the Prime Minister is snubbed by a MFA spokesperson in Beijing the next day, and there's no consequence. So, if we are going to go down this path of raising difficult issues and doing so publicly and telling our public that this is a new turn, a new approach that India is adopting, then we better be capable of following it through, but we're not. So you have this, what I would consider faux muscularity, that is not being followed through. And the net result of this is that you are, I think, further pushing the India-China relationship into unproductive, unhelpful directions. I'm not sure what the easy answer to this is, other than for us to develop our own capabilities and to, just to pick up from what Zorawar said on the border issue. I've actually never been convinced that we need to resolve the boundary issue as a matter of priority. Because if you look at demographics, if you look at the growth potential of India, if you look at the strategic capabilities of India, if you look at all the metrics of what the Chinese, to use the Chinese phrase, comprehensive national power, the gap between India and China is going to close as we look over the next 10-15 years. And insofar as a boundary settlement may be the product of the relative power differential, I think it doesn't hurt us if this issue gets kicked down the road. So I don't understand why there is an effort, particularly when the LAC is tranquil, for us to indicate that we are in a hurry to settle this. I'm not sure what the diplomatic utility is, and again I feel that this is a reflection of the same desire of the establishment to show that we are tougher. We care more about India's national interests than previous governments have done in the past. And I think this is creating problems. I think it's complicating India's relations with China. It's making the relationship even more of a function or even more of a derivative of what happens on the US-China front or on the China-Japan front. So we need to focus on developing India-China relations based on their intrinsic worth, just as we would do for India-US relations, rather than looking at this in a purely triangular way, which we have tended to do, particularly in the last 1 year.